Alright, I was going to start off here by talking about gamma correction. In short, the gamma correction is how an image is displayed. In an ideal environment, the input amount will correlate and be linear with the light intensity. So it'll be just a straight line upwards, but unfortunately the input amount doesn't correlate, and it's more of a parabolic curve, or a half of a parabolic curve upwards. So it slowly increases and then it just goes up real fast. And what that will cause is these really sharp shadows here. You'll get these really dark areas. It'll fade between your midtones, and your brights, your highs and your shadows will be blown out a lot of the times. As you can see right here, it's really blown out. And the gamma correction is basically a compensation that's added to the image and the textures inside of the scene, and it equates to the inverse of the curve that I mentioned. So what will happen is, in Modo, since it works with gamma linearly, most of the images that you use for textures, etc., will already have gamma applied, probably about 1.0 gamma. So what you need to do is correct that. And what happens is, in order to correct that, you take your 1.0 gamma and divide that by your target gamma, which typically is 2.2. And in doing so, on a final rendered image, will give you something like this. And things are a little bit more even, the shadows are a little bit more blended, and overall it's just kind of brighter. You don't have to crank up your lights to get a lot of the lighting into the scene, which would in turn end up blowing things out. What you will see is the fading of the textures here, and that's where the linear workflow comes in, is applying a gamma correction to each texture itself. And in doing so, you'll get a lot more saturation in your textures, and you'll get an overall better look. And that's what I use linear workflow in Modo constantly. I work in 2.2. So let's go back, open up Modo, and for the files that I have, I'm going to start off loading this Moof cube. The folders that you have right now, the environment, there's a web page for Moof, PDF, the camera data itself, which I'll get into in a minute here, which is off the screen, is the focal length, angle of view, film backing. We'll go over that in a minute here. Your backplate, the HDRI. There's several different ones. There's a cleaned one, the color matched, and reflection. I'll just be using the color matched one because of the actual object that I'm going to be lighting. So start off with loading this Moof cube, the OBJ, and you see it's a 1 meter by 1 meter cube. And what I'm going to start off by doing is going into the shader tree, rendering, and turn on global illumination right off the bat. Turn the ambient intensity down to 0. Enable indirect illumination. And I'm going to go into setting up the camera. And in order to do that, let's go to camera here, and camera effects. Alright, that's all set. Drag that up. The focal length should be about 50 centimeters, or 50 millimeters, I'm sorry, so 5 centimeters is okay. Angle of view is correct. There's no lens distortion on this back plate at all that we're going to be working with. And the film width, which is, wrong folder. Where did I put it? Environment. Camera data. Where is it? Is 36 millimeters by 48. So we're going to change that to 48 millimeters. And with that being done, I'm going to drop in the environment backplate that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go in here. This is the backplate that I used in the image. So we're going to drop this in to the environment spot here. So Load image, add clip, load image. You can just drag and drop it in there too, but since I'm working on one screen capturing it, I'm going to do it this way. And let's see. Load that in. Go back to environment, add image map, use clip browser, and load this in. And right now we're going to go into the texture locator and change it to front projection and set this to camera, so that way wherever you rotate the camera, that image is going to be facing it constantly. So actually, before I forget here too, go into camera, or into the render settings here, go to your width, and if I remember correctly, the actual image ratio is 1280 by 960, if I'm not mistaken, so that way your aspect ratio is correct. And I'm going to go into camera view here, and you can see I'm going to try and position, through looking through my camera, try and position this cube correctly. And that way you'll match the actual angle of the back plate too. It gets kind of wonky sometimes here, but it's pretty close, so I'm going to call that good. And with that being done, switch back to perspective. And now that that's in position, I'm going to actually make a shadow catcher here. Now, you can go into presets if you have them installed actually, and it is under meshes, basic. You can just drag and drop one in, but I'm going to do one here by manually. So hold shift down, click the plane, and actually seeing that the cube is down, it's not actually at ground level, so I'm going to go back into the camera here a minute and actually move that up here. And move this back down. And now I'm going to scale this plane up here and just make it ridiculously large. There, that should do. And we're going to assign it material, so hit M. Just going to call it just shadow catcher. And go into the material tree over here, and I'm going to drag it above the base shader because I need to have its own shader here for this to work correctly. So once that's done, go to add layer, special, add another shader, and go to your texture layers under the shader and change the, where'd it go here? Sorry, it's under, oh, right here, sorry. Alpha type shadow catcher. And that will cause it to just be invisible and do nothing but catch the shadows of the object in the scene. So once that's done, I'm going to load in the HDRI that we have. So go back to this, go back to the environment, and I'm just going to toss this in here just so it gets loaded up. It'll probably take a minute here. Hopefully not crash.
How big is that file?
Argument invalid. Okay. The file itself, it's 5.6 megs.
What are the dimensions?
Oh shoot! Hold on. Let me.
Oh, it's not important.
Oh, there it is. Never mind. 2048 by 1024 looks like. So it's not ridiculously large, but it does the job. So we're gonna go in here, minimize everything, and go to see item and create another environment for the reflections. And there's the extra environment. We're going to add another layer, image map, use clip browser, and use the HDRI. And we're going to have to set this so it is actually defaulted to a spherical map, surprisingly enough. So there's different map types here, so it could be, if it was cylindrical you choose that, but it's spherical. Go to render preview here a minute, and I'm going to turn off this so you cannot see the backplate at all. So this is the positioning of the HDRI currently, and it's, as you can see, it's wrong based on the backplate. There are no doors behind it at all. So in order for us to get that, we're going to have to rotate it. So if you rotate it slowly, I'm going to flip it around here. You see the doors are here now. But one thing I noticed with this backplate, for some reason, it is reversed. There's no smaller door over here. It's on the other side somehow. So if that's the case with the HDRI that you're working with, you need to go to the horizontal wrap and change that to -1. And reset this back to 0 and rotate it back so it should be positioned correctly. And I'm just going to type in, whoop, that's a little bit too far. It's about there. Alright, and as with this, since we don't really want this visible to camera, I'm going to turn that off. Turn this one back on. And before I forget, like I said, the gamma correction. By default, Modo has, I think it's set to either 1.0 or 1.6. I can't remember correctly because I've had it changed for so long. If you go into the rendering, you can change your default gamma to 2.2 and display gamma to 2.2. That's what I work with. I guess you could leave it at 1.0 or 1.6. The workflow will differ though. And since it's set to 2.2, we're going to take the gamma, divide it by 2.2, 0.4546, and you can see it corrected the image, the gamma of it. So now it actually is the correct color. And now that that's done, I'm going to go and import the vehicle for this scene. So file import, and let's go back in here and import that. And it switched around things here. Let's change that back. It looks like it imported everything. So I'm going to delete the camera that it imported because I don't need it. And so we have the model here now. As you can see, it's not going to be in the right place. Or it's set way back there. It depends on where you want it. You can move it around in here. The model is set to scale also, as the cube is also, so everything's correctly set. So you can move it around. You don't have to scale it up or down at all. It's all set. So I'm going to close this a minute here, divide this, and set preview. And shove that over. I'm going to move this up a bit. Get it up a little bit closer. I'm going to have to expand the ground plane a little bit too in doing this. And I don't particularly like that angle, so I'm going to rotate this a bit here. Set it to, I don't know, set 90 degrees. Alright. Now, let's move the shadow catcher here a little bit. Drag things out. As you can see, you should be starting to get a shadow underneath it now here. Alright, now currently it looks like it imported environments also when I imported it, so, and also we have a direct light in here that I don't want. I'm going to turn that off. Get rid of that. And yep, there's the environments. I'm going to delete this. Make sure it's the correct one, yep. Delete that. Now if we go back in here, should the camera. Not getting correct reflections here. Hold on a second. See, I missed a step here, clearly. And delete this just to be safe. So not sure why it's doing this. Back into render, let me check something about it here. It's enabled. I'm not getting reflections at all for some reason all of a sudden. I'm just going to delete this and drop in a new environment. I'm not sure why it's doing this. But, this environment. What's that?
Is the environment on top overriding the bottom?
It should not be. Shouldn't matter. I'm gonna flip them around just to try it here, but front projection, that's set correctly. Yeah, see, I'm not. Turn that off. Now it's working. Alright, maybe it was overriding it. I wasn't doing that last night when I was working with it. Alright, well, let's go back in here. Flip this again. And I think I had that to like 103 or 05 or something. So I'll go out like that. As you can see, just setting up the simple HDRI. I don't have any other lights in this scene, just the HDRI environment for producing the reflections, and it's working out quite nicely. Most of the materials in here that I have dropped on here are presets, and I've adjusted them accordingly. One last thing with Modo that you really want to pay attention to is noise reduction. And so apparently, I just figured that out. I can't hit F9, the hotkey, to render because it will pause the recording. So, let's start.
Try hitting F10 to get the material editor or the render options in Max.
Oh, jeez. Alright, let me drop this back here and just do a preview render of this here a minute. And you'll see the noise that I'm talking about here. You can see it's really grainy here. It really kind of splotchy reflections. That's one thing that you have to work with in Modo a lot, especially with the textures, the samples for blurry reflections. I kind of have a text file here that I normally use that I just go with. A rule of thumb here. Whoop. And usually I'll set the AA to about 16 samples. The refinement shading is to about 0.15 or lower. Threshold about 5%, and your ray threshold setting is really what will control a lot of the graininess and the reflections. Usually I'll go no lower than 0.01. Usually 0.05 is what I end up using. But so change these around a little bit here. So set it up to 16. Change this to, I know for a fact that I think I had to use 0.01 actually for this. And like I said, let me load these back up, make sure I have the right settings. That's a lot of text file. Apparently I closed it. Alright, that's 0.15. Get rid of that. So 0.15, and for the refinement threshold, I have about 5%. And you can change the reflection depth and refraction depth also. Sometimes you don't get reflections through glass. That will change that. Sometimes some of the reflections too behind other objects, the shadows, the reflections can mess with it. If you change that, it might improve it a little bit. With those settings applied and you render this out, it should give you a decent result. You shouldn't get a whole lot of noise. So I'm going to pause this a minute here and let this finish. Okay, so now that it's done rendering, you can see a lot of the noise is gone in it. The reflections are pretty decent. Not having many weird, odd reflections coming off the ground plane at all. You can rotate the environment around if you want. You can get different results. I kind of like the reflections. It doesn't really matter, I guess, since nobody else will know but you when you set these things up. You can flip the reflections on the HDRIs if you like them better, the opposite way, reverse. It doesn't really matter because you're not seeing it in the back plate, since the reflections, I mean, it really depends on the environment, I guess. But in this scene you could flip it and it wouldn't be noticeable at all. But that's pretty much how to set up the HDRIs in Modo. I didn't add any lights in this scene at all because it wasn't called for. Sunlight, there is no sun in this since it's indoors, so but that's really about it, and that's how you set it up.